Good morning, everyone, and thank you for coming this morning. Those of you in the hall and those online. Lee, how many people are joining us online this morning?
Hi, so 82 people.
So we have 82 people and maybe 50, 60 here. So here we are on September 8th. So before I get into the matter at hand, we have some announcements. This Tuesday and for 3 more Tuesdays, Fred will continue to do Sutra Study of Vimalakirti Sutra for members. And please note, we will end a good half hour before the debate begins, so you'll all have time for those of you who have the inclination. There will be a half day of mindfulness on the 14th. That's next Saturday with Maria Teresa. Whether you're new or experienced, days of mindfulness and opportunity support and deepen the practice of mindfulness and meditation and nourish the seeds of well-being. So it's a very nurturing day. It's a half day, and it's encourage people to come here in person, just to kind of put it all down and come here and be renewed, or it's also available online. On September 18th, we'll be doing our Full Moon Loving Kindness and Compassion evening from 7:30 to 8:45. Fred will be leading it. Please join us in the hall if you can, or online if you can't. And again, there'll be meditation talks and a lot of loving kindness and compassion practice. And our metta choir will be performing and leading us. There are a couple of retreats coming up. One is called The Miracle of Mindfulness, October 4th through 6th, led by Bill and Maria Teresa. It's a weekend retreat. It's a good introduction and a good reminder just about the basics of mindfulness practice, living in the present moment, and how to nurture oneself. Usually we go outside externally for things to nurture us and renew us, but it's wonderful to learn that we have that capability ourselves. And then Fred will be leading a 3-day retreat, October 24th for 7, for those who have some meditative experience and have been on at least on one retreat. It's called Composting Fear into Fearlessness. So this is for all of you who still live with fear, anxiety, worry. What? Reminder that the deadline for the Miracle of Mindfulness retreat is tomorrow, so please register. And then, of course, we have our regular meet every week, morning meditation, 7 to 8, person online, mindfulness and recovery, meets on Monday and Tuesday nights, in person and online. Yoga with Evelyn and Sharon are on Monday nights at 5:30, Qigong with David on Wednesday nights. We have our extended meditation, and Fred will be offering interviews this week. And we have our Wake Up Tampa Bay mindfulness meditation group, people ages 18 to 35, meets bi-weekly on Fridays, and their next meeting will be September 20th. And we rely on our members to support us and through selfless service, so please go to the website to see ways that you can contribute to the support of this facility and the community. So last week, Angie taught, and she taught on mindful speech. And at some point, she made some reference to, I think, the political environment and sort of the quality of the speech that characterizes our political discourse. And then, many weeks we do chanting. After meditation, we do 10 or 15 minutes of chanting. And last week, what was chanted was these very famous verses from the third Zen Chan patriarch of China, Tseng. And I was listening to them. I was in the hall listening. And those clarion lines in which it begins, "The great way is not difficult, for those who have no preferences. Yes. When love and hate are both absent, everything becomes clear and undisguised. If you wish to see the truth, then hold no opinions for or against anything. To set up what you like against what you dislike is the disease of the mind. When the deep meaning of things is not understood, the mind's essential peace is disturbed to no avail. So in listening to it last week, I thought, this could be the antidote to what's going on here. And actually, I was going to talk about that today, and I still might. But this is very deep, and it's kind of high order in terms of Buddhist teachings. And not many of us who are here today are that deep into Buddhism or even know much about Buddhism. So when especially these days, when having a political opinion and having an idea and having a view, you're like, there's something wrong with you if you don't, right? And especially not to have it strongly and be committed to it, right? Essentially, there's something wrong with you. When you hear something like, give up all preferences, that liking and disliking is the disease of the mind, very hard to understand and even stomach. Is that correct? Because it is a 180. Is there anything further away than a 180? It's a 180 from the way we are, our culture, our environment, the information and the encouragements that are coming our way are totally pushing us in the other direction, right? I mean, I don't need to explain that to anybody. We know that. So I wanted to have a dialogue. Let's talk about this. But I wanted to give some ground to it. So I'm going back to the Buddha, okay? Now the Buddha, he kind of stumbled into community, okay? He was just one man, had a great enlightenment, understood the true nature of things, totally blew out all his delusions about self and other. He was awake. And then when he decided to teach, people began to be around him, to come to his teachings. But in those days, when people encountered a spiritual teacher, especially somebody who had the wisdom and probably the charisma, there was just something about his being, people just wanted to follow him. So, as he went from village to village teaching, there were many people who just listened to his teaching and went back home. But there were many who said, we want to go with you. So over time, he had lots of people going with him. They were not all enlightened beings. Many of them were following him because they were the exact opposite, but they knew he had something. So over time, a community developed around him, and over time, a larger community developed around him of all these unenlightened beings who were now living with each other and interacting with each other, and they got into all the stuff that we get into. And if you ever read the rules for the monks and nuns, you realize they got into stuff that we would never even think of getting into. There were a lot of bad boys and girls in those days who became monks and nuns, you see. So these 250 and 300 and something rules for monks and nuns came out of experiences, okay, where something would happen and somebody would bring it to the Buddha and then he'd make a rule. You can't do that. Okay, so this is one of those. But I think it relates to what we're going on. All right, so now the Buddha and the mendicants, that's a translation of his monastic followers, were arguing, quarreling, disputing, continually wounding each other with their barbed words. Sound familiar? Okay, right? You know, there was a notorious quarrel. They couldn't persuade each other to be persuaded. So some were trying to persuade others to see it like them. It wasn't working. And they couldn't convince each other to be convinced of what they were convinced of. Does this sound familiar? Yeah, this was okay. So this is all this quarreling and disputing, and the Buddha, he got word of it, and he said, in my name, summon them here. So they were summoned to him. And the Buddha said to them, is this really true, mendicants, that you've been arguing, quarreling, disputing, continually wounding each other with your barbed words, and that you can't persuade each other to be persuaded, nor can you convince each other or be convinced? And they, I'm adding, shamefaced, said, yes, we have. What do you think? Now again, these are men and women who've left home, who've left everything to follow the Buddha and his way. Remember? It's like, and look what they're doing. What do you think, mendicants? When you're arguing, quarreling, disputing, continually wounding each other with barbed words, are you treating your companions with kindness by way of body, speech, and mind, both in public and private? Obviously, one of the fundamental things that the Buddha's been teaching them for weeks, months, God knows how long. No, sir. So it seems that when you're arguing and you're not treating each other with kindness, so it seems that when you're arguing, you are not treating each other with kindness. So what exactly do you know and see, you futile men, that you behave in such a way? This will be for your lasting harm and suffering. Then the Buddha said to the mendicants, these 6 warm-hearted qualities make for fondness and respect, conducing to inclusion, harmony, and unity without quarreling. What are these 6? So again, I'm just presenting these as the Buddha's response to sentient beings being divisive, quarreling with each other, not listening to each other, always thinking that they're right and the other's wrong, right? This is his response. First, we should always treat our companions with kindness, in public and private. This warm-hearted quality makes for fondness, respect, conducive to inclusion, harmony, unity, without quarreling. Secondly, treats their spiritual companions with verbal kindness, and then they just have ... It means the same way, right? They use words that do no harm, that increase fondness and goodness and happiness and well-being, and the same way with their thoughts in their mind. So they're all conducive to inclusion, harmony, unity, fondness, and respect. So he says, this is the way, in the actions of our body, speech, and mind, we need to behave with each other. Furthermore, a mendicant shares without reservation their material things, such as their food with their alms in their alms bowl. So, now again, he was talking to monks and nuns, but he was basically saying, another aspect of being with other people is to what? Is to be aware of their needs and to be generous. In being generous, in being aware there are people who are needy, and I'm aware of that, and I respond to that. This is another way to have harmony in society. So, why I'm using this as an example, so the Buddha's world, his Sangha was a family, was a society. And again, people came to him very diverse. You know, India at the time was very divided into castes. He accepted everybody based on castes. He accepted everybody whether they came from a royal family or they came from an untouchable family. So, you know, lots of mixing of all kinds of people in his Sangha, right? And that's probably a lot of what he's dealing with. People are not used to being with people who are not like them, who see things differently than them, who have different habits than them, who eat different food from them, you know. And so he's teaching them how to live in harmony. So I think he's giving us some insight in how when we see the same quarreling, the same divisiveness, the same unwilling to listen to everybody, the same attempt to kind of, disparage people with other views and try to, show them that our way is the right way. He's coming from a very different place, right? To be aware of the actions of our speech, of our body, how we are in harmony with each other, of our mind, to be generous. Further, a mendicant lives according to the precepts shared with their spiritual companions, both public and in private, that are intact. So, let's talk about religion. So we know that many Americans say they ascribe to a religion, right? And then there may be many Americans who don't ascribe to a religion, but maybe ascribe to a certain kind of ethical or humanistic way of value. Is that true? Yeah. I mean, most people don't say, yeah. I mean, I have no values. I don't care. Harm people, hurt people. Yeah. So what, right? I mean, most people are not like that, are they? And so the next one he says, we live according to our precepts. We live according to the principles of our religion or of our society or even of our laws or whatever, that are ethical in conduct. Yeah, I mean, he goes on. So because he also says, we sort of, like, what is our view here? So like in Americans, we have, what do we have? We have things like the Bill of Rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I mean, even in our political world, we have some long-established principles, right? That really all of us could ascribe to and live by. So here we are. Do we have that in our society now? What do you think? Do we have these 6 concords that everybody agrees with? What? What do you think? How many think we do? How many think we don't? How many don't think? Yeah. So, when you're on your own, that's one thing. But when you enter into relationship with one person, or you enter into relationship with several people, or you enter into relationship with many people in some kind of group or organization, or when you enter into a city or a state or a country or a world, there has to be some kind of agreed upon principles of how we treat each other, right? Or how we resolve conflicts with each other. Is that, do you agree? And if you don't have that, then you can't expect people to observe something that doesn't exist. Is that true? So I think it's very important in this current political time, when it's so easy to cast aspersion and take sides, to ask ourselves some deeper questions about what's really going on here and what's the source of the problem. Just imagine, imagine what? Imagine going to elementary school. Everybody have a sense of what goes on in elementary school? Imagine going to an elementary school where there are no teachers. Right? Kids just show up every day. They do what they want. Okay? So you walk in there, let's say you walk in there, it's a couple of months into the semester. You walk in there and what do you see? Chaos. Chaos. Right? Right? You might even see kids harming each other, banging each other over the head, taking their things, right? You might see good stuff, right? But if you walked in there and you saw chaos and you saw the way they were treating each other, rather than running around and trying to restore order, right? Which is not going to work. Why? Because you're going to go back home. You might ask yourself, what's the cause of this situation? Right? We use our intelligence. We see this chaos. We see this the way that people are treating each other, and rather than just kind of doing something, we step back and we go, what's the cause of this? And when we find the causes, no teachers, do we blame the kids? I mean, they're the ones who are running riot, and they've written over everything, and they destroyed everything, and they're just, and the bigger have taken what they want, and the weak ones are whimpering in the corner, and right? Right? Do you blame them? They're just grade school kids. Who do you blame? If you're going to hold, who do you hold responsible? Yes. You look for the cause. Yeah, I got to get to the people who made these decisions, because these decisions have to be changed or there will just endlessly be what? This will continue. Now, I don't know if this analogy holds up, but somehow looking at what goes on and the way people talk to each other, which only reminds me of, the playground in 7th grade, the way people talk to each other and disparage each other, and make fun of each other, right? And don't talk about what's really going on. It really reminds me of grade school, doesn't it? Yeah, so this is a quote from the Buddha. The Buddha said, "What has been taught by the Buddha is to act for the welfare of many people, for the happiness of many people, for the benefit, welfare, and happiness of many people." So, if you're looking for a social aspect of the Buddha's teachings, it's to act for the well-being of people, to act for their happiness, to act for their benefit of many people. Right? So how does that sound as a kind of an entranceway when we enter the world of relationships, one-on-one, one-on-three, work relationships, family, extended family relations, society, culture, community, politics, nationwide, the world. There's a place we're coming from. What is that place? To work for the welfare and the well-being of human beings. Right? So, in the Buddha's time, it was a very different world. You may not believe this, but there were no political parties. There were no elections because it was a feudal society. Right? The economic system was a given, sort of an agrarian system, so there were no economic theories, there were no political theories. So the Buddha's way, right, his message to affect the well-being of the world and beings was primarily, we might say, by promulgating ethical behavior. Ethical behavior. And in our tradition, we have the 5, the 14, different trainings, But it's basically what the Buddha was teaching is how do we treat each other, that's in the 6 Concords. So that was his message. He wanted to help human beings treat each other in a way that creates well-being, that creates happiness for the individual and society. He did that by getting people to look at the actions of their body, speech, and mind and see, are you doing harm? Or are you doing good? Is that clear? So he did have a social program. He was active in society. Right? Many people think, Buddhism, they're just concerned, they're kind of inward, as opposed to us, we're outward. But that's nonsense. We're all involved with each other. We're all involved with human beings. I mean, what is this? Are you human beings? Are you society? Yeah. So we're all in society together, but our way of transforming it is very much at how do we transform the actions of people, the thoughts of people, the words of people, so they do not do harm to individuals or the fabric of society, and even better, they contribute to the well-being, the welfare of society. So this has really been so the Buddha's message was individual, like begins with you. You live your life according to right action. You live your life according to right training in ethical behavior. And again, this is not from above. This is not from above. This is, like not to kill. So obvious, right? Does anybody here want to be killed by somebody else? Just wondering. Anybody here want to be killed by anybody else? How about, forget about you, you don't want to be killed. Anybody want the people you love to be killed by somebody else? How about the people you like? Do you want them killed by anybody? Right? I mean, how about people you're indifferent to? The people who work in Publix and stock. What do you think? Is it okay if somebody kills them? We laugh. Why? What? Of course not. Because why? Because life is the most precious thing a human being has. Right? Life is the most precious thing that every human being has. And the Buddha said everybody has a right to live. So to take another's life is to do harm. the opposite of taking life would be what? Protecting life. So not only are we not going to take life, but we're going to do everything we can to protect others. Right. Now, the Buddha encouraged his followers to bring, right action, ethical living into the world, right? Don't just keep it for yourself. Share it. So therefore, for 50 years, the Buddha went around, and his community went around, village to village, town to town, giving teachings, talking to people. Now, they talked about many various kinds of spiritual matters, but always at the basis was these teachings about, actions of body, speech, and mind, and karma. How do we create good karma for ourselves, for our families, for the world? Well, it's all through the actions of our body, speech, and mind. Now, what I find interesting is the Buddha. How about those who won't do it? You see, those who are in opposition. Do you know what I'm talking about? All right, so I'm going to do my best to lead an ethical, good life, wholesome life. I'm going to do my best to share that with other peoples and in whatever environment I are. But what happens when you keep running into people who have absolutely no interest or are even opposed to your views? What do you think? Did the Buddha give any teachings about opposing unethical people? No. We do everything we can to motivate, educate, communicate, but we don't stand in opposition to those people. Right. Because that creates what? Discord, divisiveness. And what is the outcome of discord and divisiveness? What? Suffering, or continued outcome. Yeah, so, it's in a certain sense, it is a more difficult way because, we want to take a stand in opposition to. We want to let the other know that they're what? Wrong. I'm right, you're wrong. Which implies what? I'm good, you're bad. I'm smart, you're stupid. Anybody like people talking to them that way? If somebody talks to you that way, what comes up in you? Anger. Anger, anger, anger. Yeah. The Buddha talked about divisive speech in the mindfulness training on right speech. Divisive speech is speech which divides those who are united and stirs up those who are already divided. Does this sound like what you're seeing in the news every day? I mean, this is 2,600 years ago. Speech which divides those who are united and stirs up those who are already divided. Spoken by a person who loves factionalism, delights in factionalism, enjoys factionalism, speaks to create factions. Does that have a little ring of truth to it? And there may be many people in this room who are in a faction. Right? In a faction with who? Our people. Is that true? We're in a faction with our people. We like our people. They're good people. They see things the way we do, right? They're not like that faction. They're bad people, they're stupid people, they're immoral people, they're, right? Factions. Factions are what? What do factions do to the whole? What? Divide it. Divide it, divide it, divide it. And factions become more factional. They become more reinforcing. Because when you're in your faction and you're only hanging out with people in your faction and you're only reading the news that your faction reads, all your views become what? What? You know, they just always get affirmed, they get stronger and stronger. And the less and less we are having anything to do with that other faction, right? Enemies. Enemies. I mean, do you get a sense of how this thing proceeds, how this thing unfolds, and how careful you have to be? In another teaching, the Buddha, in terms of divisive speech, he talked about abstaining from creating or perpetuating social disunity. And he encouraged his followers to speak, to unite those who were divided and support them, and to create harmony. He said, our work is not to fuel faction and factionalism and divisiveness. Our work is to create concord and reconciliation. This is the Buddha's teaching 2,600 years ago. You know, don't disparage anybody, he said. Everybody has the potential to be a Buddha. Don't disparage anybody. Right? Gandhi said, hate the sin, not the sinner. As soon as we hate people, as soon as we blame people, as soon as we disparage people, we are ripping apart the social fabric that unites us. Right? And if both sides are doing that, you see where it ends up. So, when I stop now. Okay? I was going to share a little Thai's teaching, Thich Nhat Hanh's teaching, but why don't we stop now? Yeah, questions? Questions, comments? Make sense, doesn't make sense? Easy to say here in the hall, not easy to say out there. People online can just chat it in. Yeah, what's going on with you? Or do you all already agree with me? Are you part of my faction? I didn't know I had a faction. Yes, just wait. So the people online can hear you. I mean, this is, you know, there's a debate. I mean, the reason I'm talking today, but did you know there's a debate on Tuesday? What do you think it's going to be? You think they're going to be talking about these issues? Loving kindness, compassion, understanding. Yeah, yeah. One of them's going to look at the other one and say, "Yeah, I really want to understand you." Yeah, your views are very different than mine. Tell me how you come to them. I want to understand you. What do you think? You think you're going to hear that? disparagement, put down, zingers. Yeah, not right speech. Yes.
It's amazing how the teachings of the Buddha are still so relevant right now, today. I'm thinking of the factions, and I think that term that they're using now is tribalism in terms of politics, which creates more and more division, and I mentioned the word enemy. And so I feel that the way society is behaving in this kind of political debate, I hope that people will get the word of Buddha, or at least some kind of teachings relating to the Buddha, because the way things are going is kind of scary. It's just my comment.
Mm-hmm. Yes? Yes, Lee.
So Bruce Costa asked on not standing in opposition to, how does Fred think the Buddha would have advised President Roosevelt regarding the war in Europe in 1939 on 7 December
So
1941?
again, how would the Buddha advise who?
So how you think the Buddha
Oh.
would have advised the President Roosevelt regarding the war in Europe?
Well, again, let's, I think that's not the question. I think the question is, how would the Buddha advise President Biden and President Putin and President Netanyahu and the head of Hamas right now? To me, that's much more relevant, right? That's real. The Buddha actually advised kings when they asked for his advice. We are always advising, protect life, stop killing. Thich Nhat Hanh, my teacher, great teacher, he was not an armchair philosopher, an armchair Buddhist. He was right in the midst of a civil war, where everybody was what? Taking sides. And if you didn't take a side, you were the enemy. And his trainings to his followers was, don't engage in partisan politics. Take the side against killing. Take the side of protecting life. So that's, yeah. I mean, it's when the bloodlust is up, it's very hard to stop it until it's run its course. There's something about human beings, we like war, right? We like violence. I mean, we just cannot break our addiction to doing harm. Right? It's kind of sad, isn't it? But anyhow, the Buddha's teaching, do no harm, protect life. Yeah, I mean, that's what Thich Nhat Hanh, just stop it, and then talk together, negotiate, listen to each other, find out what the needs are, mutual respect. Can I live in a world where people see it different with me and compromise? I mean, there's so many ways that, conflicts can be resolved. But, we jump so quickly to violence these days. And it's just mirrored in what we read in the paper and, these high school shootings. They never really get at what, to me, is really the underlying cause of all this. You know what I think? Anger. Our country, we're just, so many people are so angry. Kids are so angry, hurt, feeling alone, right? Again, it's like, we can endlessly throw solutions. That's what I'm saying. We can only throw solutions. That's what politics does, right? Each side has their own political agenda, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to throw so much money at that, and I'm going to create a policy for that, right? But nobody ever goes, what's the problem? Not everybody reaches for a gun, do they? But when you're angry, and you feel alone, and you're scared and hateful, then watch out. Isn't that true? We all know that. But nobody talks about anger. They talk about mental health issues. Which, of course, there are mental health issues. See, I call anger a mental health issue. Right? Fear is a mental health issue. But we, in our society, we think those are normal. Wouldn't anybody be afraid? Wouldn't anybody be angry? No. Right? So we have to look, the Buddhist tautology is always to look deeply under the surface to ask, what is causing this? You see? Yeah, other questions? Yes, in the back. And if there's anything else online, just raise your hand.
It's just a quick comment. You're saying reminded me of something I saw in when Thich Nhat Hanh was doing a retreat for the Israelis and Palestinians. He made a really poignant point in one of his talks. He was talking about how, and at the time it was during the Bush administration, and there was all this talk about Condoleezza Rice was working on some sort of Palestinian peace agreement, blah, 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 in Israel and Palestinian. And in the middle of one of these talks, all of a sudden, Thich Nhat Hanh said, he's like, well, it doesn't matter how the most ingenious peace treaty in the world is imposed on groups of people who just hate each other, that it's not going to do any good. The violence is going to seep through. The war will continue in some shape or form or another. And he said, it was an interesting thought experiment. He's like, but what if it was the other way around? There was no, he's like, but if they all respected and had compassion for each other, and there was no peace treaty, the war would immediately end.
Right.
It's like the peace treaty is irrelevant if the people hate each other.
Yeah, no, that's excellent point. And that's what's missing, you see. That's why that's the limitations of politics, which is sort of about governance and about law. You can change laws, right? But if you don't change the human consciousness, the human mind, it's just going to be endlessly. Now, what's the problem? Changing laws gives us something very concrete that we think we're doing, right? So everybody gets all fired up, and everybody and we're going to change the laws, and we're going to change the policies, and then they change the policy, or don't. And we feel like what? Those who just changed the policy feel like what? What? It's fixed. It's settled. We've won. Does anybody ever feel that way about any social issue? But we forget what? There's a whole bunch of people over here not happy with it. and they're part of our society too. That's the problem. And if there's no dialogue, if there's no, communication between people who are curiosity about, why they do things like this. Why do you hold your views? Why do, gee, my view is so oppositional to yours. I'm interested in your view. Yeah, I care about you. Yeah, I want to know how you think. That, this is the problem. Changing hearts and minds through mutual dialogue and respect takes time. Right? I mean, just think how shocking it would have been. I'm just throwing this out there. After the Hamas, did their raid, and what they what? Yeah, and they killed 1,000 people, and they kidnapped hundreds, right? What if somebody said, wow, why would somebody do that? Why would somebody just kill people and kidnap people? Our first response is what? Kill them. Kill them all. Which just leads to what? More killing. More destruction. More hatred. Right? But it's a very, you go, what? Can you imagine suggesting that? Yeah, why don't we just stop and ask them? Maybe if they feel heard, maybe if they felt somebody's listening to them, somebody wants to understand the depths of their anger that would lead them to kill, there may be another way out of this. Does this sound kind of shocking? This kind of view? Yeah, very. Thich Nhat Hanh and the Dalai Lama, after 9/11, remember 9/11? You know what they said? They gave talks where they practically begged and said, don't start killing and bombing. I mean, you see where the Middle East is now. Don't start killing and bombing. Right? This is not going to lead to a good place. I realize 1,000 or whatever it was died, but do we want to kill hundreds and hundreds of thousands because of it? What are we going to unleash? And you know what they suggested? Sort of the same thing I said. Why don't we stop and go, who are these people? Like a lot of them were suicidals, you know what I mean? They drove their planes into the Twin Towers. Like, who are these people that feel so unheard and so wronged that they'll give up their own life to kill other people? I mean, what you know what I mean? To send their message. You see, it's so basic. Right? What's your name? You the religion teacher. Yeah, you're a teacher. Do you ever ask kids when you see them acting in ways like, what are you feeling or what's going on with you? Oh. She said, oh yeah, all the time. Why don't you just beat him down or something? I mean, in the old days, right? Get out the switch. Get out the paddle. Remember the good old days? Hold on. Why don't you? Yeah. I mean, it's just interesting. On a small level, we know this, right? And yet, when it gets to the big level, oh no, it's going to be very different.
Normally, whenever my students are acting out, it's their suffering. Something deeper is going on. They come in with troubles from home, troubles from within. And so if they're acting out, I realize that there's a them issue going on. And my job is to help them cultivate the tools to be able to articulate what they're feeling, how they're feeling, and then self-regulate and
You're
move
kidding. You mean you don't immediately punish them for bad behavior?
No, I mean,
Hold on, or you don't just tell them, shape up, act right, or you can get beaten. I mean, that would be the simplest thing to do.
it wouldn't be effective.
Oh. Because,
Because, well, an eye for an eye would lead the whole world blind. And so,
have you ever heard that before? Yeah. So, see, we know this, right? We've learned it just in our child rearing, right? And yet, we conduct our politics, our national politics and our international politics, oblivious to these very fundamental truths about human beings and how to change human beings. The problem is it's slow. Right? You know, the Buddha said, right? You know, to really begin to change the psychological underpinnings of so much of this harming that human beings do to themselves and do to others, both on the very personal, interpersonal level as well as societal level, it takes what? What? Time. And it takes willing to communicate and dialogue and listen and, right? You know, many years ago I used to run programs for abused children. You know, I understood why parents hit their kids. Being a parent myself. Why? Because in the short run, it's effective. In the short run, it's effective, right? Kids acting out, you give them a slam, you throw them up against the side of the wall, and they'll stop. True? It's true. So I wouldn't argue. I would say, yeah. But then I would say, but there's a problem. Besides you're in trouble with abusive services now. That's one big problem. But, you know, you're not teaching your kid anything. You know what I mean? That's the problem. But I understand you. I'd let them know I understood them. I understood their frustration. I understood their anger. I understood they were a single parent with all these things to do, and this kid's crying and acting out is just, you know, just one more thing to get in their way. I understand why they blow their top. I mean, I was always let them know, I understand you. Yeah, I understood. Maybe that's the way you were treated. I understand. Right? So first, understanding. Not putting down, not blaming, not saying they're bad. Understanding. And then letting them know what? There is another way. There is another way. Right? Simple stuff. Yeah. Over here. And again, for those who are maybe new, if this doesn't seem right to you, or you think this is all kind of naive, poppycock, you can say that.
Well, that's a great segue. I appreciate what you're sharing, and a lot of it resonates for me. But I do struggle when the answers to some of the global conflicts sound to me like what the former president said about Charlottesville. There are good people on both sides. Because I think that some of these situations are more difficult and more complicated than being able to say what motivates the other people. If it were as easy or straightforward as to be able to say, let's just sit and talk, which to me, as a psychologist, always seems like a great idea. But I'm not sure that it answers for me the reality of what happens when there are those who seek to harm you, and you can sit and try to speak to them, but they don't want to speak to you.
Yes.
They just want to harm you, and that's what I struggle with.
Yeah, so this is, and people have their own cause and conditions. You might have your cause and conditions where your affinity is toward one group and not the other. And that's one thing we have to acknowledge, because this is a bigger view, right? This is not the tribal view. This is not the partisan view, right? Yeah, I mean, it's, are you ready for this? Just try it out. It's acknowledging there may be somebody sitting over there who feels the exact same thing about the side that you uphold. Exactly. They're all bad people. They've killed my people, and they deserve what they get. And they should be, could that possibly be true? That you have your exact double with the exact moral, yeah, that's what the Buddha was talking about. That's the problem. You know? To acknowledge it in this world, people feel aggrieved. You know, people feel aggrieved. And aggrieved people, when they have the means, will act out. So the question is, where, you know, do we want to put a Band-Aid? Do we want to put a temporary situation, you know? Or do we want to really go to the root and end this so people can live in harmony with each other? Right? And all I say is to ask yourself, do you think out of what's going on here when they come up with a political situation, which they will, at some point the bloodletting will end, the destruction will end, and they will, you know, whether it's imposed or whatever, you know, they'll come to some kind of agreement. It always does. But if the underlying issues and the feeling is not dealt with, it's just going to happen again. I mean, so again, it's like big picture. You know, short picture, yeah, I get it. You know, feelings are inflamed, and they start, you know, it's like, but he started the fight. He started it. Yeah, you're right. But, so it takes a big mind, and one has to kind of arise above one's, kind of rise above the self and see all selves. Yeah, I mean, it's very, you know, I mean, can you imagine, for those of us who are here, you know, after 9/11, you know, Thai saying, yeah, talk to them. Anybody who would do anything to that must feel so unheard, must be so aggrieved, must, you know, why would a human being go blow up other people, you know? He said, you know, we need to talk to them. You think that got far in the halls? No, nobody wants to talk to him. We want to what? We want to kill him, eliminate him, lock him up, you know, variations on the theme. And that, you know, is a short-term solution. But the anger that people have, the sense of injustice, the sense of aggrievement, and the resentment that builds just continues in our world, right? I mean, this is not profound, is it? We all know this in human relations. Anybody ever nurse resentments? You know, what's it like to nurse a resentment when you think somebody has acted egregiously to you, has harmed you, or harmed somebody you loved? You ever have resentment against them? What? And have you ever nurtured that resentment? You know, nurtured it, yeah. Keep the fires going. What does that do for you? What? Brings you down. I mean, that's mild. It what? Yeah, it's you know, in Buddhist psychology, we're nurturing unwholesome seeds within ourselves. Right? The person that we see was the perpetuator of injustice. Do they have any good qualities, Ryan? No. Not when you're in that place of resentment. Right? Now, I realize now, I'm saying, when you're in that place of resentment, do they have any good qualities? Absolutely not. Right? All we see is what? Very one-dimensional. Yeah. Yeah, it's not easy to go, oh, you know, they love their children too. Can you believe it? You know? They love their children too. They cry when their children die too, just like me. You know, the basic of Buddhist compassion is that phrase, just like me. All human beings just like me. Nobody wants to suffer, just like me. Nobody wants to see their loved ones suffer, just like me. Right? Oh, even my enemy is just like me. Right? How can I break out of my narrowness and see the bigger picture? They're just like me. Right? The people on the political side, they're just like me. They think that they're what? They think they're right. Do they care about this country? Yes. They think they care more about this country than the other side. Can you believe that? They think they have noble intentions. The other side, no. And I'm talking about both sides. Same mind state. Everybody cares about their children. Everybody wants their children to live and thrive, don't they? Yeah. But we divide ourselves up by social and political and religious. And, you know, we are geniuses in separating ourselves from others, aren't we? The hardest thing, it's getting harder and harder, especially with social media, is to remember this one? What has been taught by the Buddha is to act for the welfare of many people, for the happiness of many people, for the benefit, welfare, and happiness of many people. Many people means who? Everyone, all of us. And we live in the world where all the messages are all about what? Separation. Care about those, but not those. Yeah? So, you know. So this is social activism, by the way. I know, no one's holding up a sign. There's no petitions to sign. There's no rally to go through, to. There are no enemies. Okay, but this is social activism. Right? Of a kind. Doesn't mean there's not other kinds of social activism, but this is social activism. Because we're trying to what? Change society. How do we change society? Changing the minds and hearts of human beings. Finally, any final questions or comments? Yes. So people online feel included.
Hey, Fred. Um, so my question is when you're having conflict with friends, family, relationships, and you already have these preconceived notions of I know how they think
Mm-hmm.
because this is what they've done in the past, or, you know, I'm remembering this memory of you doing this, so this is probably how you're going to be
Yeah.
here in 5 minutes when I do this. How do you
Yeah.
overcome that in the situation? Because you already know this is what they're going to think, and this is going to be just as indicative of last time.
Yeah, and if you always act in the way you've always acted and respond in the way you always responded to their responding to the way they've always responded, no change. It's going to keep going. Can you change them, by the way?
Yeah.
Maybe. You don't know people. Anybody ever try to change anybody? Are they all amenable to it? You can't count on people changing. You know, you do your best. Yeah. So they do something that they've done in the past, and you're aware of the pattern, and you're aware of the conflict. What could you do differently that would change the dynamics? So can you give me an example without being too personal? Like they might do what? What do these people do?
They want to bring up politics, and they want to have conflict over it rather than respecting one another's views.
So, anybody ever been in a situation like this recently? So the people, yeah, this is it. We live in a time people have strong political views, and they want you to know it. Is that true? And they love the dispute. Okay. And you don't find that very beneficial or enjoyable. Okay. So one thing you could do is not take the bait. So when they come over and go, you go, oh, okay. What'd you have for breakfast? What are you doing later today? I mean, so one thing is not to take the bait and shift. Right? Changes the interaction. There are people in my life, family, who I love. I have an agreement with them. No politics. Many things we can talk about. We don't talk about politics. Okay? Sometimes they really want to talk about it. So I say, okay, 15 minutes. You have 15 minutes starting now. Angie knows this. Go on your mark, get set, go. I want to hear everything. And I'll just sit there and listen. Okay. Okay, 15 minutes is up. You know, tell me something good that's happened in your life this week. You know what I mean? So there are ways to deal with it, right?
And so, I guess in the past, if this has happened, this has been brought up,
Yeah.
and you know it's been brought up, so there's a trigger there.
Yeah,
And
well,
it's like, oh boy, this is going to be the whole day of we're going to be mad at each other. There's not going to be a lot of
yeah, you
words.
see it.
And so you see what the day is going to. How do you change the whole day
Well,
from
who's
playing out?
you
'Cause
know,
you
it's
can't
your
control.
trigger.
Yeah.
So is this your first time here? Have you been here?
Third time.
All right. What do you think mindfulness and this stuff we're doing? It's not just like, be in touch with our breath.
Mm-hmm.
We're learning to be mindful for this. So when we enter life and we know we have a trigger, we're ready.
Mm-hmm.
And when that trigger happens, we've disconnected it. Like you have an alarm, but you cut the wires. No alarm goes off. They're still pushing the button, but you cut the wires to the alarm. That's in you. So you have to have your own way of moving away from reactivity. Are they allowed to have their own views?
Yes.
Okay, okay, that's all. They're allowed to have their own views. You've heard their views enough time, and
And how do I sit there and not be mad at their own views? Like, oh man, here we go again.
because you're doing something different.
It's all in the change in me.
Yeah, but you're also you can, but it doesn't have to just sit there and endure it. You know, as I say, you can put a time limit on it. You can change the subject. You can, you know, yeah, I appreciate you got very strong views. To be honest, I'm the wrong one to talk to. I mean, I'll say to people, you know, I'm really not interested. You know, you're wasting your time talking to me. But there must be lots of people out there who would love to dispute with you. Yeah, that's fine. You know, I mean, I'm nice, but also very clear. You know, this is not my thing. I mean, people are, you know, we call that people talk at you. You know, they just talk at you. I used to, who was that? I used to have some relative, you know what I mean? It'd be like they call. I could just put the phone down, you know, come back 10, 15 minutes later. Yeah, put it down. You know, you know they just want to, you know, they just want to talk, just talk at you. All right. You know, you don't have to get annoyed. It's just the way they are. They're lonely, or, you know, some people are just so self-absorbed. All they want to do is tell you about themselves. I know nobody here is like that. Yeah, so, you know, after a time, that gets a little tiring. Sometimes you can just raise your hand and say, do you have any interest in hearing what I've been doing this week? Anybody interested out here? You know, and you know what happens a lot of time? I mean, sometimes they'll say no, but most of the time they'll say, gee, I have been talking a lot about myself. You know what I mean? They'll have a little insight. But again, it's, you know, you can handle these things skillfully, right? But yet set boundaries. I could tell a funny story, then we'll stop. So I had an uncle, most opinionated guy in the world. I mean, I love my uncle. Hard-headed. So when I was young, like a teenager, he loved to get into disputes with me, and I would join him. You know, we'd argue back and forth. You know, then I probably got to the wise old age of 18, and like, you know, I just wasn't into it anymore. You know what he did when I was silent? He used to say, I know what you're thinking. And then he'd go on to present my argument that he thought I was doing. Anyhow, you know, you just can't win. So anyhow, I really presented today just to kind of get you thinking. These are really, you know, these are really very significant issues, especially as we, very much involved in this political time and social time, and you know, it's very relevant to what's going on in the world. And you know, how can we help? How can we help this world suffering? Thank you, everyone.